The Caribbean Sea is not what most people picture when they think of naval confrontation. They picture gray northern waters, fog, cold. They picture the North Atlantic or the Western Pacific, the theaters where great power rivalry plays out in deep blue against the backdrop of island chains and contested straits. The Caribbean, in the popular imagination, is turquoise and warm, a place of trade winds and coral and container ships running between ports with familiar names. That imagination is wrong, or at least incomplete. The Caribbean has always been a strategic space. It is the maritime backyard of the United States, a body of water through which enormous volumes of energy and commerce flow, bordered by nations whose political trajectories have, at various points in history, aligned with American interests and against them. Venezuela sits at the southern edge of that sea, and Venezuela, in the years since its political and economic collapse accelerated, has pursued a foreign policy built in part on confrontation, on the idea that provocative action against American assets generates domestic legitimacy, attracts the attention of patrons in Moscow and Beijing who value disruption, and costs less than it appears to, because Washington, in Caracas's calculation, will always prefer to de-escalate rather than escalate. That calculation has been tested before. It was about to be tested again. It was a Saturday morning. The time was 7:33 local. The sun was already high and fierce. The sea stayed calm at 1, visibility unlimited. The kind of perfect tropical clarity that gives no cover and no excuse for error. An Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer was transiting southbound through the eastern Caribbean, approximately 90 nautical miles northeast of the Venezuelan coast, conducting a routine presence patrol in international waters. She had been operating in this general area for 11 days, part of a rotating schedule of United States Fourth Fleet assets, tasked with maintaining visible naval presence in a region that had seen increased Russian and Chinese naval activity over the preceding 18 months. Her presence was logged, her course was standard, and her crew was 3 hours into the morning watch. In the Combat Information Center, the picture had been clean until 7:19, when the surface search radar picked up 2 contacts emerging from the Venezuelan exclusive economic zone boundary on a bearing of 210. The contacts were running fast. Initial speed estimate 28 knots, course approximately north-northeast. The ESM system had begun building a classification file within 2 minutes. Radar emissions consistent with the Venezuelan Navy's Lupo-class frigate profile, supplemented by fire control radar characteristics that matched the automatic anti-ship missile system that Venezuela had acquired decades ago and maintained with varying degrees of reliability ever since. 2 frigates, Venezuelan Navy, closing at 28 knots. At 7:28, a third contact appeared, emerging from a position further west along the Venezuelan coast. This one was slower, 16 knots, and its radar profile was consistent with a patrol vessel of the Constitution class, smaller than the frigates but adding a third vector to the developing geometry. 3 Venezuelan naval vessels converging on a single American destroyer from different bearings in international waters without any prior radio contact or navigational announcement of any kind. The watch officer's assessment took approximately 20 seconds. He reached for his headset. Captain, CIC. 3 Venezuelan contacts, 2 Lupo frigates and 1 patrol vessel, closing from 210 and west. No radio contact established. Request your presence. The captain arrived in 90 seconds. He was already reading the ESM summary on his handheld display as he came through the hatch, and by the time he reached the tactical picture, he had absorbed the essential geometry. He stood at the display without speaking for a long moment, tracking the 3 contact icons, projecting their courses forward in his mind. The 2 Lupo frigates were on a convergence track that, if maintained, would place them in a blocking position approximately 12 miles ahead of the destroyer's current course within 35 minutes. The patrol vessel was angling to come up on the destroyer's port quarter. Not fast enough to intercept, but fast enough to be a presence. 3 ships, 3 vectors, 1 American destroyer in the middle. The geometry was designed to create the impression of encirclement, even if the ships lacked the speed and numbers to execute it definitively. It was theater as much as tactics, but theater in these waters, with these stakes, had to be taken as seriously as the real thing. "Log the contacts and the time," the captain said. His voice was entirely even. "Full recording, all sensors, ESM, optical, radar, everything. Who knows we're here?" "Fourth Fleet is tracking our position in real time, sir. P3 is 4 hours out. Closest additional asset is USS, 412 miles north. All right. We're handling this ourselves for now. Let's not get excited." He turned to the communications officer. "Channel 16. Are they talking?" "Negative, sir. Nothing on any frequency we're monitoring." The silence from the Venezuelan vessels was characteristic. Venezuelan naval doctrine in these harassment operations borrowed heavily from the IRGC playbook, an influence that was not coincidental given the security cooperation relationship that Caracas had developed with Tehran over the previous decade. Approach without announcing, maintain ambiguity, force the other side to make the first interpretive move. If the American ship altered course, that was a victory. Footage of a superpower yielding to pressure. If the American ship maintained course and something went wrong, the ambiguity of intent provided diplomatic cover. The silence was not the absence of communication, it was the communication itself. The captain understood this. He had been briefed on Venezuelan naval harassment tactics at every fleet readiness review for the past 3 years. He had read the incident reports from previous encounters in these waters, the fast boat approaches, the simulated attack runs, the deliberate course crossings designed to test nerves. He knew what this was, and he knew that the response to it was not complicated, provided the crew executing the response had the discipline to do it correctly. At sea, distance is language. The Venezuelan frigates were speaking clearly. The response would be clearer still. "Maintain course and speed," he said. "I want a full battle roster check. All systems nominal. I want the CIWS in autosave. Not auto-engage, autosave. I want the 5-inch mount crew manned, but standing easy, nothing pointed at anyone. We are conducting lawful transit, and we will continue doing so." The Combat Information Center settled into its operational rhythm. The watch team worked the picture continuously, updating CPAs, tracking emission changes, logging every course and speed variation by the Venezuelan vessels. The surface warfare coordinator ran the geometry every 90 seconds and reported the updated numbers to the captain, who stood at the display and listened and gave no visible reaction. At 7:44, the lead Lupo frigate made its first move beyond simple approach. It transmitted on the International Maritime Safety Frequency, Channel 16, in Spanish, not English. The message, translated by the destroyer's Spanish-speaking communication specialist within 40 seconds, was a demand. American warship, you are operating in the sovereign maritime zone of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. You are ordered to alter course immediately to 090 and exit this area. Failure to comply will result in defensive action. The message contained two significant falsehoods. The destroyer was not in Venezuelan sovereign waters. It was 90 nautical miles from the Venezuelan coast, well beyond the 12 nautical mile territorial sea and the 200 nautical mile EEZ boundary within which Venezuela had no authority to restrict innocent passage by foreign warships, and there was no legal basis under any provision of international maritime law for a Venezuelan naval vessel to order an American warship out of international waters. The captain dictated his response carefully. It was transmitted in both English and Spanish simultaneously on Channel 16. Venezuelan naval vessel. This is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters approximately 90 nautical miles from the Venezuelan coast. We are conducting lawful passage in full accordance with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and customary international maritime law. We are not in Venezuelan territorial waters or contiguous zone. We do not recognize your authority to order us to alter course in international waters. We will maintain our current course and speed. All communications and actions are being recorded and transmitted to United States 4th Fleet Command. We recommend you operate in accordance with COLREGS and international maritime norms. The response was logged, time-stamped, and transmitted to 4th Fleet within 60 seconds of transmission. Washington would have the text within minutes. The Venezuelan government would know within the hour that their transmission had been answered with legal precision and would appear in every official record of this encounter as an unlawful attempt to restrict freedom of navigation in international waters. At 7:51, the tactical picture shifted. The lead Lupo frigate increased speed to 31 knots and adjusted course 2 degrees to the left. A small change that extended forward placed its projected track across the destroyer's bow at a CPA of approximately 1.5 miles. At 31 knots, it would reach that crossing position in 18 minutes. This was the classic bow crossing maneuver designed to force a course alteration or accept the risk of collision. In previous Venezuelan encounters with American ships, this had worked. Ships had slowed, altered course, given ground. The footage had been played on Venezuelan state television as a demonstration of Bolivarian resolve. The captain watched the updated CPA projection. 1.5 miles was tight. At the closing speeds involved, it was genuinely uncomfortable. It required both vessels to maintain precise navigation. Any deviation, any mistake, any sudden mechanical issue on either ship could produce a situation that neither government wanted and that no amount of political narrative could control. After the fact, he did not alter course. "Launch the Seahawk," he said. non-threatening profile. I want it positioned between us and the lead contact, 500 feet, lights on, standard patrol orbit. It is not to activate any targeting systems unless I give a direct order. Clear. Clear, sir. The MH-60R lifted from the flight deck at 7:54 and climbed into the brilliant Caribbean morning, banking southwest toward the approaching Venezuelan formation. From the bridge, it was visible for nearly 3 minutes before the distance swallowed it into the blue haze. In the CIC, its track appeared as a friendly icon, moving steadily toward the intercept position. The helicopter's presence communicated precisely what it was designed to communicate, that the destroyer was not operating alone in her awareness of this situation, that there were eyes above as well as on the surface, and that the documentation of this encounter was comprehensive and would be impossible to dispute or reframe after the fact. The Seahawk was not a threat. It was a witness, a very capable, very visible, very armed witness. At 8:02, the Seahawk pilot reported that the lead Lupo frigate had activated its automatic fire control radar. Not a lock, the system was in search mode, but an active illumination of the frequency band associated with targeting. The ESM suite on the destroyer confirmed it simultaneously. The emission lasted 47 seconds and then ceased. The captain noted it, logged it, did not change his expression. What the Venezuelan commander may not have fully appreciated, or may have known and chosen to test regardless, was the nature of the system he was facing. The Arleigh Burke class destroyer is not merely a ship that carries weapons. It is a sensor platform of extraordinary sophistication, capable of tracking hundreds of contacts simultaneously, processing electronic emissions with a precision that allows real-time classification of radar types down to individual system variants, and communicating that picture to higher command and to Allied forces with essentially no lag. Every emission from the Venezuelan frigate's fire control system had been captured, classified, time-stamped, and added to the evidentiary record. If the automat system was ever activated again in the presence of an American warship, the analysts reviewing the ESM data would know exactly when it had been used before and against whom. There are no secrets in modern naval electronic warfare. There is only information, and who has more of it? At 8:09, with the lead Lupo frigate 13 minutes from its projected bow crossing position, the captain authorized the next step in the calibrated response. The Seahawk descended to 400 feet and positioned itself in a slow orbit directly above and ahead of the Venezuelan frigate's course line. Visible, deliberate, impossible to ignore. The pilot activated the helicopter's non-lethal green laser designator and painted the frigate's bridge structure with 3 brief pulses, 1 second each. Precise, controlled. The same message that had been sent to Iranian boats in the Gulf, to Chinese destroyers in the Pacific, to Russian ships in the North Atlantic. The message that transcends language and doctrine and translates identically in every naval culture on Earth. We see you, we can reach you, and we are choosing not to. Simultaneously, the destroyer's communications officer transmitted a final message on Channel 16, shorter this time and delivered in Spanish only. Venezuelan naval vessel. This encounter is being monitored in real time by United States 4th Fleet. and recorded in full. Your fire control emissions have been captured and logged. We are continuing our lawful transit. We strongly advise you to comply with COLREGS and maintain a safe distance. The transmission was factual. Every word of it was true. And the Venezuelan commander knew every word of it was true. At 8:13, the lead Lupo frigate reduced speed, 28 knots, then 23. The CPA projection shifted from 1.5 miles to 2.4, then to 3.1. The bow crossing maneuver was being abandoned. The second Lupo, tracking the first, altered course 5 degrees to the right, opening the range rather than maintaining its flanking position. The patrol vessel to the west slowed and fell into a holding pattern, its erratic closing movement replaced by the listless drift of a vessel whose orders had changed. The geometry was dissolving. By 8:29, all 3 Venezuelan contacts were on courses that were opening, not closing. The lead Lupo had reduced to 16 knots and was bearing away to the southwest. The CPA projections for all 3 contacts were now greater than 8 nautical miles and increasing. The Seahawk pilot confirmed the picture from above and reported it in 4 words. "Contacts are withdrawing, sir." The captain stood at the display for another 3 minutes, watching the icons migrate towards safe distances. Then he looked at the surface warfare coordinator. "Log the resolution, time, and positions. I want the complete package. Every transmission, every ESM capture, every laser activation, every course plot. Compiled for 4th Fleet within 90 minutes. I want the Venezuelan fire control radar emission flagged specifically and sent to SOUTHCOM intelligence." He looked around the CIC. The watch team was steady, professional, entirely unbothered. They had done exactly what they had trained to do. Nothing more dramatic than that, and nothing less. "Good work," he said. 2 words. He left it there. The destroyer continued her transit southbound through the Caribbean. The Venezuelan contacts receded into the southwest and eventually fell below the radar horizon. The sea remained flat and brilliant and hot. By 10 o'clock, the eastern Caribbean looked exactly as it had at 7 o'clock. The same turquoise water, the same white sky, the same trade wind pushing a low swell from the east. What had unfolded in the preceding 96 minutes was an encounter that would be analyzed at fleet level, at SOUTHCOM, and in the classified annex of every readiness assessment produced about Venezuelan naval capability for the next 2 years. It would be analyzed not because it was close, it was never close, but because it was a data point. It confirmed that Venezuelan doctrine for harassing American naval vessels had not changed materially. It confirmed that the specific mix of approaches, the bow crossing maneuver, the unlawful radio demand, the fire control radar activation, remained the toolkit. And it confirmed, as every similar encounter before it had confirmed, that the toolkit does not work against a crew that has studied it, prepared for it, and trained the discipline required to respond to it correctly under conditions of genuine physical proximity. Venezuela will continue to test. The Caribbean is too close to home, the domestic political incentives too strong, the patron relationships with Russia and China too valuable to abandon the tactic entirely. But the tactic's value erodes with every encounter in which it fails to produce the reaction it needs. Every time an American destroyer maintains course, documents everything, responds with legal precision, and continues its transit without alteration. The footage Venezuela hoped to generate does not exist. The narrative Caracas hoped to write goes unwritten. In the long arithmetic of gray zone competition at sea, that is how deterrence accumulates, not in a single dramatic demonstration, but in the steady, unglamorous repetition of professional competence applied correctly, in the right place, at the right time, by crews that know exactly what they are doing and exactly why it matters. The Caribbean is not just turquoise water and trade winds. It is a theater. And on this Saturday morning, the performance had gone exactly as it should.